Hello, folks. Today we are live.
Live streaming is on.
Hello, folks. Today we are live with Anand, who is design leadership at Paytm, and he has quite a lot of experience in design. Hello, Kshitiz. I'm fortunate to have you with us today.
Hey Sumit, thanks for having me here.
Thank you for joining in. And Kshitiz was telling us about how he has a deep connect with education right before we started this stream. And Kshitiz, how deeply do you connect with design and education? And they're two different things, but both of them, how deeply is you connect with them?
Right. Yeah. So first of all, thank you everyone. Hello to everyone joining in live. Pleasure to be here. Always love to share thoughts with folks. So my name is Kshitiz, and I currently am a associate vice president of design at Paytm, and I also run a non-profit organization called Happy Horizons Trust, and where I'm the chairman, board chairman. And so yeah, I for me, I live like two lives parallelly. One is of education in, and the other is in design, right? And to answer to what Sumit mentioned, somewhere to me they are both connected, deeply connected, in fact, right? If you ask me, design is kind of a discipline which really looks at problem solving, right? And if you look at the end goal of every design is to solve a problem, right? And the end goal of every education is to equip you to solve problems, right? So in a way, um, whatever education you seek, irrespective of the discipline that you pursue, with in your masters or in your higher studies, the end goal is eventually to solve some kind of a problem, right? And similar design also teaches you that, right? You want to solve a problem, right? The context could be very different. If you're a fashion designer, you're trying to solve a different problem. If you're a, let's say, a user experience designer, you're trying to solve a different problem. If you're a brand designer, you're trying to solve a different problem, right? But at the end of the day, you have to learn how to solve problems, right? And that's what designers really are equipped with, and designers really do. Education, to me, I think, is such a I mean, we have been, of course, all of us go through education. There are, around the world, we go through different education systems. But um, very few talk about the purpose of education, right? And that's one thing which I try to focus a lot more when I do my work in education, because I do feel that there has to be a purpose behind it, right? It should not be just about I'm seeking or I'm taking undergoing education just for the sake of doing it, right? I think we have done that for quite a bit, quite a few years now, for generations, so to say. Uh, Unlike probably if you look at our forefathers, where they actually had a purpose, right? So you went to a certain Gurukul system because you had a certain purpose, right? So you wanted to be the best, let's say, archer out there, or you wanted to join, you are from the royal family. So your Gurukul system would prepare you to lead a kind of a kingdom, right? So there was a purpose to that education, and everything, kind of set you up for that purpose, right? But somewhere down the line, with our modern education that we're going through today, that seems to be missing, right? And that's the reason why you have so many people who kind of finish education, so to say. They finish the schools, they finish the college, they finish the high school, higher education, and then they're like clueless, right? Like, what do I do with this, right? And I do feel like this is something which I've been trying to promote a lot through my work. Is that can all students who are undergoing education, in whatever capacity, right, um, have that sense of purpose of what they're doing, why they're doing. And when you bring that similar philosophy, if you extrapolate it to a larger audience, then you realize that eventually all of us are students for life, right? Because your purpose in life keeps evolving. So the kind of education you seek should keep evolving, right? So today, for example, if I want to set up a business practice, I need to learn new stuff, right? So my education then suddenly has a different purpose now. Tomorrow, when I set up a business, I want to scale it up. There is a different new purpose out there, right? So eventually, I feel that if you believe in this very simple philosophy that with education there is a purpose associated, and if you understand that, then all of us are lifelong learners. All of us enjoy the process of education a lot more. And of course, designs, I feel, is a nice way to is a nice means to achieve that, because for me design is a lot about problem solving, as I said. But with design, you, of course, you learn to empathize more with the systems, you learn to empathize more with the people, you make it more human centric. uh, and the purpose for solving problems in the case of design is, of course, is not just to say that, okay, I'm going to solve a problem, but I'm solving a problem to make someone's life better, right? And that's the fact that really makes design very interesting to me, is that whatever I'm doing, right? So if you look at, let's say, any of the projects that I involve in, the end goal is yes to solve a problem, but then solving the problem with a hope that that person's life, the end beneficiary's life, is going to get better with my solution in place. So that's, yeah, just like an opening narrative of you may say, but that's what something which I kind of believe in. Yeah.
That's quite an interesting narrative, I must say that. Uh, so let's switch back to design specifically, because that's that's something that we love quite a lot. And like, what are the things that you would like to tell us about design that you have taught at a lot of places that are quite well known?
Hmm.
What are the things that you would like to tell us today regarding design?
Sure. Yeah, I think design. So I purpose. In fact, I got into design purely by accident, right? Like I never wanted to be a designer. Like never in my growing up years, I'd ever thought design was a career choice for me, right? But it just so happened, by some stars aligned, and there was something happened, and I just happened to get into design, and I just found it very fascinating to be, right. And even today, after 20 years of being in design, you realize that it is so misunderstood, or people don't understand the true value of design, right. I feel that there's a couple of things which is very important to talk about design, right. One primarily, for example, is what really is design, right. So there could be multiple ways of looking at it. So there is this classic uh, understanding that design is that design can be a verb, and a design can be a noun as well, right? So when you look at design as a noun, it's like you're talking about that finite, tangible something that comes out of a process. Right? So, for example, there could be a well-designed, this is a good design. So when you say this is a good design, which means that the end product at the end of the day is something really nice. So you could have a physical product, you could have a digital product, you could have a service, which is an end result of a design process. But you're talking and emphasizing on that end result. Right? So that's like a design as a noun, where you're talking about that valuable thing which you get at the end of the day. But then there's design as a verb, right? So when you talk about, I like to design, right? Or like, when you say that this is a very nice design process, or this is very nice, and that basically is understanding that there's this complex ecosystem or complex system out there. You're using the lens of design to really simplify it to come up with a final design solution, right? So I feel that as a designer, we should be really mindful about design in both its form. If you focus only on the process part, the work part, you miss out on creating something useful, something valuable at the end of the day. If you focus only on the valuable part and don't focus on the work part, you end up, going through lots of challenges in trying to create something beautiful, something meaningful, something useful, something simple at the end of the day, right? So that kind of helps me always to understand that design can be it plays different roles in different capacities, and depending on the situation, you can do that, right? That is one part. Second thing I realized is that, and I often quote this from like generally when I do a lot of, my workshops, or, in fact, there's a dedicated chapter on this on a book that I'm writing on design as well, is that if you look at it, right, there is probably no other discipline in our life which gets impacted more than the discipline of design, right? Like our lives are impacted most probably by the discipline of design, right? It's everywhere, right? Like the mic stand that you're using is designed, the dress you're wearing is designed, the furniture, the interiors, the utensils we use, the desktop, the laptops. I mean, it's just about everywhere, right? If you look at, mobility services, if you look at, your travel, hospitality, there's design, there's an element of design everywhere, right? And when this kind of, I say this often during my workshops, and and then I pause for a moment, right? Because people then, it just hits them hard, right? Like, it's such a small, like, 5 letters, 6 letters word, 6 letter word, but the impact that it has, the weight that it has is so much, right? Because every single thing in your world, if you just do a quick look around in your home or wherever you are sitting at this particular moment, you will realize that there's an element of design everywhere, right? And that's just mind-boggling. That's such a small word, but then the impact it can have in our lives, right? Because at the end of the day, design comes first, right? Whatever it's what the people see first. It's only when you start using it, then of course you understand the engineering marvel behind it, or you understand the other things behind it. But then the design is the physical, tangible space that kind of really you get inspired. So One, of course, second part, as I said, was to understand that design is it's a huge discipline, right? There is just so many things into design. The third thing which I like to often talk about is design coming from a point of view of problem solving, which I was talking earlier as well, right? That uh, the end goal of it is to solve a problem, right? So when I feel that, and that to me personally, I think it also differentiates from art, right? Like when you look at design and art, often you have art which is more like it may or may not solve a problem, but there's a very subjective aspect to it, right? It may or may not solve a problem, but it exists, right? And probably exists. There will be a certain people who like it. There will be a certain people who don't like it, right? But you cannot have the same thing for design. Design has to be that somebody, when you make a design, something which has a certain utility value, it has to be useful for people. It has to be liked by people, right? So and that has to solve a particular problem, right? So that really talks about it a lot. In fact, today, like in the 1970s, in the 1980s, there was this whole movement in the world of design for design for real world, right? And there's a very famous writer called Victor Papanek, who basically brought this understanding that design should not be only for the elitist. It should not be only for a selected few, but design should actually solve problems for the real world, right? Because up till then, what was happening was in the field of design, people were creating a lot of fancy stuff. Like if you ask anybody, I mean, the connotation with design was something which is elitist, something which is exclusive for a few people, right? So if you have a designerly, let's say, a designerly dress or a designerly product, it meant that it's exclusive, it's expensive, it's like fancy, it's for a selected few people. But then Papanek and his team in the 1970s, late 1970s, 1980s, kind of brought about this movement which said that design should not be just for a selective few, but it should be for the masses, right? And if you fast forward to 2020 and 2021 today, I think nothing holds more true than that particular understanding of design, because today the world actually needs a lot of design solutions which can really solve problems that we are facing through.
Definitely, I also think that you were trying to say things about the book and the author of Design of Everyday Things, and I think
Mm.
that that kind of thinking is probably the first time someone reached that way of thinking. It's probably world changing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, like Norman, in his design of everyday things, it's one of those books that I kind of often recommend in a lot of my classes and workshops as well. It's an easy to read book, and it's kind of fascinating because it just opens your mind towards design, right? It just kind of has this open-mindedness towards design, kind of to absorb that the world is actually run by design, right? So you have to really come to terms with that. And he says this, and often there's this, people talk about that it's only when there's bad design that you start observing, because it kind of creates a barrier in your daily lifestyle. But if there's good design, it's very seamless, so you don't really kind of feel it. But then the moment there's a bad design, it kind of causes an obstacle, and that's where you have a bad experience, and you kind of start cribbing about it, right? Uh, and of course, there are a lot of other examples, very interesting examples I talked about in the book as well.
Interesting that you say that. And what are other things that inspire you regarding design, like the things that you're great at, and you think if you tell you, like you can express those things and make other people be great at something that you are also great at, like actionable something.
Right. So I think like I personally, in fact, I was doing a talk yesterday also. Sorry, on Friday, with a corporate set of people in a certain company. And one thing I was kind of reflecting back on my journey as a designer as well, right? And being in design for the past 20 years now, I realized that my journey as a designer has also evolved, right? So I started studying communication design, and then of course you wanted to become a graphic designer. Then web was picking up, so I wanted to be a web designer. Then I joined the industry as a user interface designer, and then of course user experience happened, and then I became a design manager. Then I was managing people, and then there was design strategy involved because we started to understand some business aspect. And then my nonprofit, where I was kind of heavily involved in design for social impact. And then of course today when I'm looking at design leadership, because I truly believe that design can play a huge role at a leadership level, right? And if you have that way of thinking at a very leadership level, that can really trickle down into the whole organization. Right? The organization can benefit by and large from design thinking and from design a lot as well. So I personally feel that at any point in a person's design journey, right? And I think the other thing which I often talk about is that whenever a person embarks on a design journey, everybody goes through a different journey, right? It's very difficult to say that two designers have the same design journey, because design by its very nature of being subjective, there is that certain element of personalization that will come into it. So my experience, something, let's say if I go through a very wonderful experience, the other person may not go through the same experience, right? And because of that very nature, that impacts who you are as a designer, right? So since all of us go through different journeys, even though the starting point and the end point may be the same, but then everybody's journeys may be different, right? And that journey is basically define who you are as a person, right? And what defines who you are as a designer. And I feel that as a designer, if you're more just one of the biggest things which I like to say is that designers are great observers, right? You basically become so sensitive to life around you that you start observing things just everywhere, right? It could be from observing, let's say, while you're traveling, while you're in a restaurant, while you're going to drop your kids to school, or whether you're attending a meeting in a work in an office. Design is everywhere, so you become such a curious observer uh, that you start to the moment there's a problem in something, it makes you feel a bit jittery, and makes you feel a bit like this compulsive desire to do something about it, right? And that I feel is it's a kind of as a designer you develop this instinct, so to say, and eventually you do something about it, right? And that's the good part about design, right? So I feel that everybody goes through different journeys. A person's understanding of design, a person's what do you call wanting to do something in design will keep evolving, right? So if you ask me today, like let's say around 10 years back, must be around 2011, I wanted to make a lot of amazing websites, right? Today I don't want to make amazing websites. Today I want to build bigger companies, because I feel that I'm using all my design learning into building companies and startups that I'm doing, right? Or like impacting at scale, at large, impacting at a large scale when I'm working with organizations like Paytm, right? So I feel that everybody's journeys keep evolving. What is really important, right? And again, I keep saying this again and again to almost every design gathering that I address. What is really important is for every person to reflect on that journey from time to time, right? The problem happens when people don't reflect on that journey. When you are like so complacent that okay, just because I'm in a certain role, I'm going to continue in this certain role without really worrying about my own evolution as a designer. That I think becomes a problematic, because then you feel like this loss in your loss in your direction, because you don't reflect enough. Right? And as a designer, I feel that at least for me, I go through this deep reflective exercises quite regularly, because I feel that it really uh, it inspires me to really understand the learning from a certain engagement and a certain thing that I have done, and seeing how I can then use it for my next thing. Right? So in a way, it's kind of we keep talking about compounding, right? So I think the compounding in this case works best when you really understand what you've learned from a past experience, and you use that to build your next experience. And then it's a larger experience that you have built, and then you use that larger built experience to build something even larger than that, right? So that's how I view my journey as a designer.
Right. Interesting that you say that experiences build on experiences, and that's how you kind of level up with it.
Yeah,
That's I think I agree with that.
yeah.
Uh, I know you're short on time, so I I was wondering if you would be open to doing design reviews of people that you know they're beginners, they are intermediate, and they're not your level of expert, but like
Mhm.
kind of know stuff. So right now, like I've just chosen two random things that people have worked on in the past 14 days. So there
Mhm.
are a lot of things that people
Mhm.
we do progress updates, and so I've chosen like
Mhm.
not the best and not the worst, but at random I've chosen two things. So let's see
Mhm.
how they turn out to be.
Yeah, sure. I mean, like, obviously, I do end up, working with a lot of students. I mentor quite a few places. I kind of, because I always feel that, as a design leader, you want to really make sure that people who are getting into design, they are more guided properly, right? So, anything that can, help, I can obviously spend some time, find some time to do that as well. Yeah.
So in the chat, I've posted a link, and
Mm-hmm.
if you can, it's a prototype link,
Mm-hmm.
and if you can just check out, and if you want, you can screen share so that we can see what you are looking at, so that
Mm-hmm.
we we get to know what you care about, and like what
Mm-hmm.
are the things that go in your mind while doing a design review, and kind of what are things
Sure.
you look at.
Mm-hmm.
You can take your time.
1 second. It asks me to install a certain font. Okay. I think the Poppins font is kind of missing, right? It seems some. Yeah, I'm not able to. 1 second. Let me see if screen share works because I'm facing some problem with seeing the prototype, right? So there is. I think you can see my thing, right?
Yep, yep.
Yeah. So I see there is a issue with the what do you call
That's not an issue.
a
He's an
font.
interaction designer, and that's what it is, I guess.
Okay. Yeah. So because I see it's a pretty blank slate right now, so I don't know what the thing is. So can you give me some context for this?
Yeah, so Afzal designs a lot of great interactions. Like
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much time this took for him, and like
Mm-hmm.
how great he wanted it to be, but
Mm-hmm.
this is one of the interactions that he has worked on in past 2 weeks, and
Mm-hmm.
that's it. He also posted kind of an improved version of this with
Mm-hmm.
and stuff, and better interaction. But
Mm-hmm.
like, what are while interacting with this, kind of interaction? What are your views on this?
Yeah. So basically, you need to know, understand, like, what is the intent of this first, right? So, for example, for me, whenever I, try to understand a experience, I feel that, the screen is only one bit of it, right? So often what we do is we end up thinking only in screens. One thing which I do when I do reviews is to make sure that you understand, the journey into that screen, that interaction on the screen, and then basically what happens after you exit that screen, right? So basically, when I look at an interaction or when I look at an interactive experience, I think of it more in flows. So when I look at flows, I'm looking at the pre-state, interaction state, and then the post-state, right? So I'm kind of build the entire experience based on that. Right? So until unless I understand more about what the context is, it will be difficult to kind of view. But again, having said that, yes, this is an interesting thing, and from what I understand, it's probably because I'm not able to understand the. It's a pretty blank
It's
screen
a
for me right
slider.
now.
You have to slide. I think Abdul failed on this one.
Okay.
I guess this is total failure, maybe.
Yeah. So basically, this is like, from what I understand, is it's created an element which you can basically do something with it, right? So you can basically you can drag and do something. But as I said, until unless you know what the animation is about, what the either it's just an animation that you're trying to build and build into a library and get people to use it. So then probably there should be some kind of support text which basically supports that as well, right? So yeah. So because other than that, there's very difficult things to review. So unless you have the context and what you're trying to achieve with this, it becomes very difficult to do the reviews of this.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah.
So there's another link. There's a Figma link that I've posted in the chat, and it's
Yeah. Once again, just open.
yep. You can take your time, and it's a couple of screens. I'll not tell you a lot about it, but you
Sure.
just try to make up your mind whatever it is, and like just
Sure. Sure.
use how if it can be, like how can it be improved, and like any
Yeah.
kind of
Of course, this seems like
feedback
it's a
appreciated.
food. It's like a food delivery product that someone is trying to build. And of course, there is a what do you call uh,
If you can screen share it.
yeah. Sorry. 1 second. Let's do that. Right. So you can see my screen, right?
Yep, I can see it. I
Yeah.
can.
Yeah. So there's like it's hotel hunt. So someone is trying to find a hotel. I think that's the icon. So again, you look at the branding part of it. I think the branding of course becomes essential, which is kind of very nice here. So you kind of the moment you enter the product, when you start the product that is out there, you kind of come up with this image. So that kind of gives you a nice feeling that yes, this is something which is about food delivery, right? Obviously, somebody has to understand that this probably stands for food, right? And if someone is not familiar with it, so again, this is something which I use when let's say you're trying to understand what kind of audience you're trying to build for. If your audience, let's say, doesn't understand what this icon stands for, they will not be able to relate to this. But because I was able to understand this icon that stands for, let's say, like covering of hot food, and that's kind of a icon with it, I'm able to understand it's probably a van which is delivering food, right? So that's my initial understanding, even without going to the further screens, right? So this is my initial impression that I get. This is what it is. And it also says it's because the product name is called Hotel Hand. So the name with the icon really has to be matching, right? So currently there's a slight conflict because currently I'm looking at this Hotel Hunt as the thing, but in reality, what it almost looks like it's a food delivery van which is out there. Right? So there's that kind of a slight disconnect that's created in my mind. But moving forward, let's say I'm looking at um, okay, so then it asks for OTP verification. I'm assuming that's the flow with which it goes through. And on this splash screen, it asks me to do it asks me to a mobile number and an OTP. But then again here, it asks me to welcome, sign to continue. There is food out here, right? So there's no context or like support text. It basically supports like what this thing is about, right? So maybe like a single line or something like get food delivered fastest, or we are here to find the best hotels for you, or find the best hotels in links, whatever the product does, like a one line, like a 10-second teaser into what the product does, right? So you can actually use that as a catching, because then the moment you do that, people are more convinced that okay, it's fine. I'm okay to give my mobile number and get an OTP verification, right? But other than that, if that's not there, I'm still very hesitant right now. Okay, fine, I'm doing this. So until someone forces me to do it, if it's a new user who might be facing a little bit difficulty in trying to really understand what this screen is about. So assuming that I'm kind of okay with the screen, I go ahead. And again, it tells me, welcome aboard, complete your profile to join us. Now, again, here there's a slight disconnect, right? Now, the disconnect being that if my goal was to, let's say, get people to, so one decision that you, as a designer, you always have to take is what do you really want to, get the user to do immediately, right? So, for example, do you want the user to really go and find, if the user is coming, the intent of the user is that I'm going to come to this product, I'm going to find restaurants and find food deals. This step here of actually filling my profile actually becomes, a kind of a, it breaks my flow, right? So suddenly I might be a little bit resistant. Oh, you know what? It's not even without even asking, showing me, some things. It is actually asking me to do a certain amount of things. So then the question comes: can this screen then be done later on, right? Can this screen be put at the delivery stage because there, hey, you know what? We want to send you a delivery confirmation. Can you send us your email address, right? Because until unless that point, do I even need this information? So you have to always question that, when there's a screen involved, when there is a any page that any user action that you want to take, how relevant it is for that user at that particular moment in time, right? If that thing can be done away with, because this screen currently is it's in my way of actually finding good food, right? So if that screen comes as an obstacle, I'm going to think of removing it, maybe bringing it back later as well. Then of course it tells me recommended hotels. Now see here again the interesting thing. Now it here it was only about food because it tells me about food. This icon of here, whereas here I can suddenly when I come on my landing page, it tells me okay I can find rooms and food. I can find food. I can find room. Right? Why can't I can have again like and now here also there's rooms and food. There's food. There's rooms. Now what if somebody wants to find like what happens, so there's this kind of a small what do you call friction that is being created here because suddenly it's very confusing to me, right? When it's food and rooms, what if I do rooms and I don't get like appropriate results? And this is like almost like I'm giving you everything in one place. So you might want to say, okay, I don't want to do that thing. And then of course there is recommended hotels based on what? What is the recommendation for? Like is it paid thing? Is it a single? Is it just one hotel that you're recommending? Is it like multiple hotels that is recommending that you're recommending? So again, here you are assumed that the person is coming only to find a hotel, right? So if the person is coming to find a hotel, this image doesn't signify hotel. This image signifies restaurant. This image signifies food. right? So again, there's a slight, difference in my expectations versus what the screen is actually showing me, right? So the product, what you call the product's um, uh, positioning is about hotel hunts, which should have, let's say, hotels, which we are talking about hotel hunting food as well as hunting rooms. Whereas here, it's probably the screen is filled with only hotel information, right? So again, slight a disconnect. What if, instead of recommended food, they could have a separate tab which says recommended food, recommend hotels. So you have one tab for hotels, one tab for food. That could be one way of approaching it. Or you might have different sections. One section you can have recommend hotels and just put up all of this information in a carousel, which you can just swipe right and you can get a list of recommended hotels. And below that, you have recommended food or these best deals at food. Again, you have a carousel below that so that the user knows on the landing page itself that here are these two main things that this product is actually recommending upfront to me. Right? So again, question that whether you can do a lot of things like because screen real estate is limited, right? So when a screen real estate is limited, you have to be very careful about how much information you show on that screen and what information you have to show on that screen. And that can only come when you're clear about why you want to show the information, right? So when you're clear about why you want to show the information, then you can understand, okay, what information I want to show. And then you can decide, how you want to show it, right? So it basically, as I said, you have to decide the why first, then comes the what, then comes the how. What people do a mistake in designing is often they go the reverse way. They start thinking about how first, then they put the what, and then they think about the why, right? Which is kind of wrong in my opinion because uh, and that happens classically when people are, let's say, designing when they start designing from a screen-based approach versus a empathy-based approach, right? A screen-based approach will tell you, okay, here's this carousel, here's this button, here's this link, here are these widgets. Let me start putting it, and then I will come to a screen, and then I'll try to retrofit. Okay, this will do this, right? So I'm kind of putting the answer in the why at a later stage. Whereas if I look at the empathy-based approach, where I'm trying to understand the why first, because why do I need to show this information upfront? I need to show this information upfront because the product is going to give you good recommendation. Okay, what is the best way I can do that, right? Okay, I can do this by actually showing 5 hotels on a carousel. Okay, how I'm going to do it? I'm going to use a carousel which is basically going to go from left to right. So two approaches to the same thing, and you can basically so with every section, with every information on the page, if you break it down to the fundamentals, right? If you break it down to the single information bit, that can really improve the way you approach design as well. Yeah, so then of course there is search. Now how do I get to a search bar? Okay, so search is here, some function here, so I click on that function, I get to this. Again, it's not very clear right now. The icon styling doesn't really, because it almost feels like this is kind of the contrast value between a selected and non-selected is not very high. So you kind of feel a little bit lost out here. Yeah, and then of course you can go to a particular hotel, you get the details of it, and then there's of course detail about this. So here you can see there's food available, there's rooms available. Here are these foods which are available, etc. You can order food from them, right? Yeah, and then of course you go to the different flows. So that's typically like an approach how you basically go and design that. So I personally feel that answering the why first is essential, right? And then you basically if you have that good understanding of that, then you look at the what, and then you kind of look at the how as well.
Right, Kshitiz. I think we learned a lot with this specific design review, like the thinking process and the things that you think about while looking at design or choosing a design,
Yeah.
or probably while making your designs,
Pardon?
or probably did we get a sneak peek into your thinking process while you make your own designs?
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, I always start with the why, right? So for me, like that's the biggest thing that I often say that at the end of the day, again, it goes back to that, why are you doing this in the first place, right? So, and the why can only come if you understand the problem solving bit, right? So, like, I'm doing this because there is a reason why, we want to do this product, right? So if you build it from there, then it becomes easy for you, right? Because typically what happens many times when people do a design, is like, okay, here's this another product. I'm going to create a similar product. So how can I do it best? I can probably copy from under Dribble. I can copy from an existing design. I'm just going to mock it up. But then you don't go to the depth of it, right? Like, why did you even do this, right? Why is it that you did it this particular? Why could not have there been another way of doing it? Right? There could be multiple things you can also start thinking about.
Right. And and I guess we have taken a lot of your time, and We'll just let you go
Yeah.
after a single question that Varun has asked us to
Sure,
ask.
sure, yeah.
And Varun has asked that I never start frames, the wireframes for design, and directly jumped to IA and visuals. For some reasons, I'm more comfortable with that. I've tried
Hmm.
adapting that approach as well, but never really got comfortable with it. And
Yeah.
with that the trouble with big clients. And he has a postscript PS. No, I don't let that affect my client's objective and make sure it is always.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, like, see, I remember back in the days, like, at some point of time, right, like, when you are, when you get a little bit more experience, then you want to probably skip the wireframe. Because, again, at the end of the day, if your time is valuable, and there are certain clients who basically think only. I remember once we had this client, and this is back in 2000 and, I think 2006 or 2007, beginning of 2007, I remember. I had a deck, wireframe deck of, it was a very complex web application, and we had a wireframe deck of, I think it was about 140 150 slides, right? And this is back in the days when we were using PowerPoint to do wireframes. And of course today people use Figma and all these fancy tools, but then we were using PowerPoint and Visio and all these old tools. I mean, I still sometimes do wireframes on PowerPoint because I'm so comfortable with it, right? But when I look at when I look at in that particular client case, right? So he would just not want to discuss in wireframes. He's like, I want to see visual elements, and if you let's say send him something, he will give you this feedback that okay, why is this black and white? Why is this why is this gray color, right? And you'll like, this is wireframes. Like I don't understand wireframes. Show me how it's going to look exactly. And I remember we ended up redoing that entire 150 slides like wireframes because in actual visual design templates. It is a very very tedious process. But then there are some clients who would feel they're comfortable, right? So as a designer, I think it's important to gauge that bit from your client from the very beginning. If you can do that, and with experience, you can actually get that right. So you can really understand. Okay, this is what my client is expecting. This is what my client is going to give me a feedback on. And based on that, you can really change your process, right? So if you are a designer, you're comfortable with creating visual designs straight away, by all means do it. But then you have to be sure that if you're going to come to a client who's going to ask you for, let's say, entire end-to-end flows to actually do reviews, and you have to do all the screens, then sometimes it might be a little bit more time consuming, right? So it's just about that. I think there have been times in my career as well where I've literally skipped the wireframe because you're already sure in mind that this is exactly how the brand guidelines have been defined. You don't have to worry too much about exploring the options, and you straight away get to the visual design. So but then like I personally go from paper prototype to actually visual designs, right? So I go from paper prototype to actual the final UIs. I sometimes skip like creating wireframes on Figma or PowerPoint or any of the tools out there. But for me, like paper prototype is a must. Like I always go through paper. In fact, I just randomly picked up a paper here, and this had like as you can see, there are some screens out here, right? So this is like a very random. I just picked up a paper from my table, and it had like a lot of wireframes out here. Right? Again, you can see here as well. So I usually use this as a thinking a lot, right? As you can see, there's the screens, how it will flow, how it will go from one screen to the other. So I kind of put out that entire flows on the paper because suddenly it's in front of me, right? And when it's in front of me, I can visually think, okay, this screen is going to cause a problem because from this screen to this screen, this is going to be a experience breaker, right? So when I do that, it helps me a lot. And then from here, I can go straight away to a Figma or something. It's just faster, right, for me to think, right? So and paper prototype, the best part of paper prototype is kind of you can just throw it off and redo it, right? But when you spend too much time on something, you it's very difficult to let go of things which you spend too much time on, right? So paper prototype, you can let go of it easily and redo it because you don't spend too much time on it, right? So yeah, so that's how typically I end up doing. I think as you grow with experience, there will be situations where you actually do more, like you will actually skip certain part of the process, right? But I always say that it's important to know the process so that you know when to break the process, right? So but if you don't know the process, right, and the client kind of comes back and cross questions, then it can be a problem. Right? But if you're familiar with the process, you can always say that okay, I feel that and I've done this because I'm completely fine with this thing. And if you feel that if a client feels that they need to see the previous part, you know that in your mind that you can actually go and recreate it even if you have not done it before.
Would you also sometimes do away with the paper prototypes?
Um, In fact, very rarely. For me, like paper prototypes is kind of a somehow it has stuck to me. In fact, I do a lot of sometimes I do a lot of branding work as well, and even like all my branding work starts with like simple sketches, right? In fact, if I remember, if I can just pick up any copy or something, I'm pretty sure there must be some. Yes, I use like notebooks a lot, right? In fact, my whole like my desk is always full with these notebooks. Like there's like just this whole pile up of notebooks. Right? I just write down everything on my notebooks, and there is always like yeah, there would be like some sort of sketches of some branding exercise. So I kind of use like writing a lot because I feel that it just helps me to clarify my thought process. It helps me to bring a lot of clarity into the things that I want to really put out there, right? Because see, what happens is when you're not clear, right? There's actually so much things to put out there. Uh, you might want to end up putting everything, right? But when you have already done that filtering on writing by writing it out by doing a paper prototype, you already bought a level of filter, right? So when you get to Figma, you already have a very clear picture of what you want to put out there, right? So you don't spend up time in putting things which you don't need there, right? So yeah, it helps me. So I mean, you can call it like an ideation stage, you can call it like an exploration stage. I call it the filtering stage. Because for me, like that suddenly becomes a nice way to filter what I want to put out there.
That was interesting to know. And I guess it's probably time to end this now. I would have loved to let this go on, but I know you have time restrictions. So, did you enjoy this experience, Kshitiz?
Yeah, it's good. Always, it's always, I would say, I know I always use this as an opportunity to also reflect on my own journeys and my own work as well. So, yeah, always enjoy these experiences.
Also, that you mentioned branding, I was wondering if you wanted to come sometime whenever you want, like to discuss branding and like. I had no idea that you had so much interest into branding.
Yeah, I do. In fact, I've done quite a lot of branding work as well. So happy to do. We can probably plan up a session separately on that, right? And then I can be a little bit more prepared onto what to talk about because
Some folks are setting up probably the design systems at some of the startups that
Mhm.
and I'm pretty sure that you'd be able to guide them through one of your sessions someday.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, see, there's a lot of things to talk about, right? But I'm sure you can always get another person to. Otherwise, it become too monotonous when the people start seeing me a lot of times, right? So, but yeah, happy to do a session on branding. I think a lot of people are doing design systems, so you can get somebody else as well. But for branding, yeah, I'm happy to do a session because I just personally feel that branding is such an important part of any person's, I mean, both on a personal level as well as your organization level, right? So, something which you can definitely do.
All right, sisters, thank you for your time. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Same here. Thank you so much, Amit. Yeah,
All right, sisters,
pleasure.
bye.
Yeah. Bye bye. Thanks, everyone. Bye bye.
Bye, folks. Thank you for tuning in.